On a cold evening in 1985, 2-year-old Crystal Robertson was found wandering outside of a K-Mart shopping center in Spanaway, Washington. She was 10 miles from her home and her parents were nowhere to be found. The assistant manager called the police and tried to ask her questions, but she wouldn't answer. It was only later, once in the care of her grandmother, that she would only say, quote, "Mommy was in the trees." The toddler was too young to explain what had happened after she had encountered a monster. A seemingly routine camping trip in 1985 marked the beginning of one of Washington state's most perplexing criminal investigations. The warm summer evening set the stage for 27-year-old Stephen Harkins and 42-year-old Ruth Cooper, a couple from East Tacoma who embodied the spirit of typical Pacific Northwest outdoor enthusiasts. The couple were both learning to become machinists at the same vocational school. They were both working as machinists at the school, and Stephen was working as a truck driver to help pay the bills. The couple had been dating for 3 years and lived together with Ruth's 5 children. Stephen and Ruth headed to their weekend camping destination near Tule Lake in southern Pierce County right after attending a friend's wedding reception on August 10th. It was a few days away from the kids in the serene Pacific Northwest wilderness, just the couple and their dog. The couple's brief getaway would end Sunday evening to accommodate their Monday work schedules. Their families contacted authorities to report them missing. At the time, both failed to show up at their vocational school jobs. On August 14th, a hiker named Walter Funk spotted their Volkswagen station wagon at Tule Lake. 2 days after that, he was walking in the same area and saw that the vehicle was still there, so he took a closer look. When he walked around to the other side of the car, he found someone laying in a sleeping bag, but he wasn't sleeping. The man had been shot in the head, presumably while he was sleeping. The body was confirmed to be Stephen Harkins, and an autopsy would later reveal that he had been shot with a .22 caliber bullet. The only sign of Ruth at the scene was her shoes. A search of the area turned up the couple's dog, who had also been shot to death. Ruth's fate remained unknown for more than 2 months. Hunters walking along 8th Avenue South found her remains near Hart's Lake on October 26, 1985. The location was about 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers from where Stephen was found. They first found Ruth's skull, and search teams located her body and purse about 50 feet or 15 meters away 2 days later. A tube sock tied around Ruth's neck stood out as the crime scene's most distinctive feature. The medical examination revealed that she had died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. Investigators reported that the sock was a white, stretchy, knee-high basketball sock, about 3 feet or a meter long, with navy blue rings around the top. It was not brand new, and it had been tied into multiple knots around Ruth's neck. Investigators questioned other people who had attended the wedding reception with Ruth and Stephen the day they left for their trip. Most people said that they didn't see anything unusual, but some said that there was a man who had showed up looking for Stephen. He wasn't a wedding guest. He had been searching for Stephen to settle a dispute regarding some damage to his motorcycle. Could it be possible that this man had followed them all the way to Tule Lake and killed them due to the dispute? Detectives questioned the man but didn't find any reason to believe that was the case. They were back to square one, but it wasn't long before the killer struck again. On December 12, 1985, 36-year-old Michael Reimer, who went by Mike, his girlfriend 21-year-old Diana Robertson, and their daughter Crystal were driving in the woods in South Pierce County, Washington, in search of the perfect Christmas tree. Mike and Diana had known each other since she was 17, but it's not known when they started dating. They both lived in Puyallup. Mike was a hot tar roofer during the year, and in the winter he made extra money as a fur trapper. Mike had traps along the Nisqually River that he wanted to check on and thought they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They were in the dense forest just west of an old mining town called Mineral. What happened in the woods is unknown, but hours later, Crystal was found outside of a K-Mart store in Spanaway. Mineral is close to an hour's drive to Spanaway, so there's no way the 2-year-old could have gotten there on her own, especially not in that weather and definitely not in a few hours. It's unknown how she got to the shopping center. Was the tube sock killer not willing to murder a toddler, so they dropped her off in a populated area so she'd be found? Nobody knows. What we do know is that Molly Koch, the assistant manager of the K-Mart, announced the discovery of a lost child over the intercom, but nobody came to pick her up.
She didn't cry. A little girl that age would normally cry 2 hours without their mommy being around. And we took her back to the toy department, walked her around, thought maybe something would be familiar, that she'd been back there or something. Nothing. She just walked around, would not utter a word.
Crystal was surprisingly quiet as Molly walked her around the entire store in search of her parents. After it was clear that they weren't there, Crystal was taken to the hospital and given a clean bill of health physically. Crystal was not able to be identified, so she was placed with a temporary foster family. The following day, Mike, Diana, and Crystal were reported missing, and a nurse at the hospital saw the report on the news. Remembering the lost girl from the day before, she called the authorities and helped them put the puzzle pieces together. Diana's mother, Louise Conrad, was able to pick the little girl up, and as soon as Crystal saw her, she put her arms out and said, "Grandma." It was the first word she had spoken since she was found. When Louise asked where her parents were, all she said was, quote, "Mommy was in the trees." A massive search was conducted by a number of people. Mike's best friend went out and checked the area where he set his traps but didn't find anything. Mike's father, Lloyd Reimer, a retired game warden, set up multiple searches in the areas where his son would regularly set up his traps but was unsuccessful. He then hired a private investigator who found a Salvation Army bell ringer who claimed to have seen Mike's red 1982 Plymouth Arrow pickup truck in the K-Mart parking lot on the day they disappeared at about 4 or 5 p.m. They didn't see who was driving the truck, though. That was the only detail uncovered by the exhaustive efforts, and even that was not a guarantee. It could have just been a similar truck. The 2-month search ended tragically on February 18, 1986. A man was walking his dog near State Route 7 when the pooch became interested in something buried in the snow. There was a red pickup truck parked there, and right beside it, the man found the remains of Diana Robertson. Diana was nude from the waist up, her hands were bound, and she had 17 stab wounds. Not only was a tube sock tied around her neck, it was tied with the same knot as the Cooper Harkins case, which made investigators believe the cases were linked. Since neither Ruth nor Diana had died by strangulation, authorities believed that the tube sock was used to control the victims during sexual assault, not as a means of killing them. There were rifle shell casings about 30 feet away from the truck, but it's not known if they're related to the case. Inside the Plymouth truck, investigators found bloodstains on the driver's seat and steering wheel that would come back a match for Diana. They also found a manila envelope on the dashboard with the message, "I love you, Diana," written on it. Diana's mother, Louise, thought the envelope's handwriting matched Mike's style, but FBI analysis could not confirm that. The discovery sparked intense debate about Mike's role as either a victim or perpetrator. Since he was still missing and presumed alive, authorities began treating him as a suspect. When investigators started digging into Mike's history, they found out that he had a violent temper. He had a history of infidelity, which he would usually blame Diana for. Her sister, Darlene, said, quote, "He took everything out on her. He blamed her for things that he did. If he was seeing somebody else, he would turn it around like Diana was seeing somebody else and justify it in his own mind." Investigators found out that Mike had been arrested for domestic assault in October of 1985, 2 months before Diana's death. He kicked in Diana's apartment door, threw her to the floor, and rubbed her face in the carpet. Diana suffered visible injuries to her nose and left eye, which led the court to issue a no-contact order. Like many abusive relationships, it seemed that Mike was able to get Diana to forgive him, and not long before the holidays, they got back together. Family members told authorities that Mike had told Diana that he could kill her and get away with it. Mike's history as an avid outdoorsman also gave investigators reason to believe he might have been their killer. His father, Lloyd, told them that he was very capable in the woods and it would be hard to get the drop on him. He was always armed on the trails, and he was a decent-sized man who could hold his own. Lloyd believed that he could survive pretty much anything out in the forest. He knew how to protect himself from the elements and could hunt, fish, and trap. After finding out that Mike always carried a firearm on him and that it was a .22 caliber, authorities started believing that Mike could have also carried out the murders of Stephen Harkins and Ruth Cooper as well. The tube sock was no coincidence. If Mike had murdered Diana, then it was nearly guaranteed that he had committed the other murders. If that was the case, he could have killed Diana, drove Crystal to the K-Mart parking lot, then drove back to the scene and could be hiding in the woods, living off the land. The blood on the driver's side of the truck made authorities believe that whoever had driven the vehicle had been the killer. But if it wasn't Mike, would a cold-blooded killer drive all the way to Spanaway to make sure Crystal was found, risking being seen in the process? It's a detail that remains a mystery to this day. Mike's boss confirmed that he never picked up his last paycheck and his bank account had been untouched since his disappearance. Lloyd told the press that his son's coat was found in the truck, which means it's unlikely he left the area willingly.
In that time of the year, when it was freezing and snow on the ground and everything, he wouldn't have left his coat in the truck if he'd have done that. Because that was a couple of miles, he'd had to walk for at least 2 or 3 miles to get out of the area onto a main road. No, they got him first.
But there was a strange detail that happened the morning of the disappearance. Lloyd said that Mike, Diana, and Crystal had gone out at 7 a.m. to check his traps. Then he said at about 8 a.m., Mike and Crystal showed up at his house without Diana. Mike was wearing a heavy winter coat and Crystal was only in a light jacket. They visited for some time and Lloyd suggested they stay for pancakes, but Mike insisted they had to go. That was the last time he saw them. It's unknown where Diana was at the time, but it's also curious that Lloyd wouldn't have asked. Despite an extensive search for Mike, investigators never found any leads pointing to where he might have been, and the case went cold. On March 26, 2011, a man found what he thought was a bear skull in a wooded area behind his house. The discovery was interesting because a tree had grown up through the ocular cavity, so he showed his neighbor, who informed him that the skull was in fact human. When the sheriff's department arrived on the scene, they used cadaver dogs to lead them to more remains. The remains were found about a mile or 1.6 kilometers from where Diana was found. The skull and part of a skeleton were later identified by dental records to be those of Mike Reimer. When the rings on the tree were counted, it showed that it was about 25 years old. The remains had been there since the time Mike had disappeared. The skull was intact, which ruled out a gunshot or major blunt force trauma to the head. The medical examiner wasn't able to determine a cause of death from the skeletal remains found. Near the remains, investigators found an identification card, but it was too weathered to read. With Mike's remains found and confirmation that he had likely died not long after the disappearance, his status as a possible suspect was thrown into question. It was possible that Mike had killed Diana, driven Crystal to the K-Mart, and then returned to the area where he committed suicide. If that's the case, how was he linked to the other murders? Was the tube sock really a coincidence? There were other cases that the authorities thought might have been committed by the same perpetrator. On March 9, 1985, Edward Smith and Kimberly Levine decided to get away for the weekend and take a trip to Grant County in central Washington. The following afternoon, Edward's body was found in a gravel pit near the Wanapum Dam. His hands were tied behind his back and his throat had been cut. His wallet was missing, and so was Kimberly. A few weeks later, the couple's car was located about 10 miles or 16 kilometers where Edward's body was found. When the car was searched, investigators found a single fingerprint that didn't belong to either Edward or Kimberly. Without the print being in the system, they were out of luck until they found the person that the print belonged to. In August of that year, Kimberly's remains were found about 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers from where Edward had been found. Authorities thought the cases could be connected until 1989, when the fingerprint was matched to a man named Billy Ray Ballard Jr. He was incarcerated in Wyoming for kidnapping, sexual assaulting, and torturing 2 women there. He was transported to Washington where he pleaded guilty to the murders of Edward Smith and Kimberly Levine, but many people don't believe he killed them. Some people say that murder was not his MO, but many criminals escalate their crimes over time, and there are no known explanations for why his fingerprint would be in their vehicle. Authorities did announce that they found it incredibly unlikely that Billy was involved in the other murders. The authorities also thought the 1987 murders of Jay Cook and Tanya van Cuylenborg might have been linked to the other cases, but their killer was brought to justice in 2018 with the use of genetic genealogy. William Earl Talbot was convicted of the crimes, and there's no evidence that he would have been involved in the other 2 cases. I did an episode about this case a while back, and you can check it out at the link in the description. The reason investigators thought these cases might be related to the tube sock killings was because they also involved couples who were separated and their remains were found in different locations. The bodies were found in remote locations, and they happened near major transportation corridors. One thing these cases didn't have was a tube sock, but authorities believe the perp could have changed his MO or just used something readily available at the time. Or, like others believe, it was 2 killers and the tube sock was a wild coincidence. Authorities haven't given up on solving the cases of Cooper Harkins and Reimer Robertson. Today, Detective Pat Beal from the Lewis County Sheriff's Office guides the tube sock killer investigation. Some investigators doubt the connection between the murders and suggest the similar use of tube socks might be coincidental, yet the investigation is exploring new angles. The investigation team has prioritized DNA analysis of Mike Reimer's 5 recovered teeth to compare with DNA found on Diana Robertson's bindings. They are also cross-referencing that DNA with the evidence from the Cooper Harkins case. Modern challenges plague the investigation. Much of the cold case backlog competes for limited resources. Labs process about 250,000 unsolved murders in the United States on a first-come, first-served basis, which delays critical evidence processing. Forensic genealogy shows promise as a new tool, though ethical questions remain. Law enforcement agencies must now tell the public about their data-sharing practices openly. Many agencies use that technique only in special circumstances. The soaring win of that method in solving other cold cases, like identifying the Golden State Killer, has pushed investigators to try similar approaches in the tube sock killer case. Lewis County investigators have more evidence found near Mike's skull, but they have kept its nature confidential. That choice to withhold certain information matches common investigative practices and protects future prosecution possibilities. Technological advances help the investigation, while time, resources, and the complexity of these connected cases pose ongoing challenges. Investigators stay cautiously optimistic about finding the person behind these notorious Pacific Northwest murders as forensic science advances. Time does have the benefit of new technology, but it also has the risk of finding the identity of the tube sock killer long after they have died, answering questions but not getting justice. Crystal was raised by her grandmother Louise Conrad and Louise's youngest son, who was 10 years old at the time Diana went missing. Crystal would be about 40 years old today, and she has never spoken to the media or made any public appearances about the case. It seems as though she left part of herself in the woods with her mother, and like Diana, it would never come back. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.